Julia.
I very often hear these conversations, and I'm involved in these conversations where the good old days, right? And everything was so perfect, not like right now. And a deep voice inside, everyone, every single time, tells me, is that so? Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guests, I'm going to share a phrase that I recently found on Facebook, on my wall. One of my friends that I'm kind of not disclosing the identity, but she posted something like this, an innocent comment. Even though you are at Disneyland, your kids should not run wild, and they should use manners. Okay? This is a typical thing. This is a perfect example of what I want to talk about tonight. And then someone right away answers, most of the population doesn't know what that is anymore, right? And someone else goes, very sad but true. And then the final touch. It's scary to think of people being more like animals these days. And I'm afraid it's only going to get worse. And this is what I keep hearing. I'm going to share a couple more phrases that I found that are relevant to this topic. The first one says, our youth love luxury and is rude, ignores authorities and has not the slightest respect for the elderly. Our children today are real tyrants. They do not stand up when an older person enters the room. They talk back to their parents, and they are simply bad. Okay? This is another phrase. And the last one is, our world has come to its critical point. The children no longer listen to their parents. The end of the world cannot be far away. Okay? These are the phrases we're going to work with. But now, let me surprise you a little bit with, how do you feel about these phrases first? Anybody kind of feels this is true? You feel like they're relevant? Or?
Well, it's dramatic, you know. The end of the world is coming because there is no blessing.
Right. It's very dramatic. But sometimes you listen to people with this negative message out there, right? It happens to be that the first phrase was said by Socrates 400 years before Christ.
Yep.
And the second one, that are very in resonance, right, with the Facebook 2 weeks ago, it's saying, it was said by a priest in the year 2000 before Christ, roughly 4,000 years ago. Okay? So we can see that there was this prevalent sentiment across history and cultures that the youth were being corrupted and things are going for worse and it's the end of the world is close. I believe the reason why that happens to most of us, that we can think that way, is because we are zoomed in. We're looking at the little details on the last 30 to 50 years. And of course, we're going to find little bleeps. Yeah, maybe the last generation was a little better than the one before, and I love the hippie generation myself, right? But that doesn't mean we're going for the worst. For the worst. I propose we zoom out a little bit and start looking at the facts a little in a broader period of time. How about 100 years? I don't even require you to go like 500 years ago. I don't want to go there, believe me. When you go 100 years ago, I'm going to pick a material fact, like our health and our medicine, the status of our medicine. 100 years ago, you would not have access to MRI that was invented roughly 27 years ago. You would not have the possibility to have an in vitro baby. There's 3 million babies that already have been born thanks to this technique. If you needed a heart transplant, a lung, a kidney transplant, well, that was impossible to have 100 years ago. Do any of you, or do you know anyone that needs either ever used penicillin for an infection or antibiotics? Or do you know anyone that is a diabetic? Raise your hand if you know anybody that we all kind of, almost all of us do, right? Well, all of those things were not curable 100 years ago. So I think it's very obvious when we go in the material directions that yes, obviously we are much better off today. That's simple. So if we go explore life expectancy, we're going to find same thing, big jump in the last century. If we go looking at the standard of living, that's probably one of the obvious ones because technology is enabling us to many different comforts. If we look at violence and wars, you would be surprised because the world used to be violent than today. And if you look at education, and the list goes on and on. I believe if you keep finding different variables, you will find the same scenario. But there's one particular area that I would like to focus, and this area is human rights. And why is so important for me human rights and civil rights? The reason is because there's a moral value that society shows up when we enhance and embrace our human rights and our civil rights. Because there's a principle of equanimity. Usually, in most of the civil rights and human rights, you're going to find that we're looking for equanimity. We're looking for the fact that we're all equal. And today is a pretty normal thing. We all kind of believe that we're all equal. But it wasn't like that 100 years ago. 100 years ago, you as a woman, Sonia, would not be able to vote, right? So your father would vote, your husband, your son, your brother would vote, but not yourself, right? And as our president, the President of the United States said in his inauguration speech, 60 years ago only, the father of the now president couldn't go into a restaurant and be served food like any other person. It's hard to believe because we're so used to living in the world like it is right now, and we get it for granted. We don't sometimes appreciate it as much. Going back to the original phrase, I think let's try to zoom out. Let's try to see things in perspective, and especially, let's try not to spread viruses of depression, negativity. So when you see some comment like that, don't jump in and comment and jump in and, get more wood into the fire. Let it go and don't get involved, or even defend the point of view. But it could be different. It could be that the future is brighter. It could be that the next generations are going to go way farther than we can